topic of the day, and this is a topic of I want to talk about the next big superstars in professional wrestling that I think are going to jump between companies. Okay, because if you watch AEW, Tony Khan's quickly running out of surprises. Right, every week he's got a big surprise. I'm gonna tell you about the big surprise. I got a big surprise. Everybody pay attention. I got a big surprise, and so he's going to have to start plucking guys out of WWE. It's what he does. It's how he stays relevant, right? He's going to have to go put the bug in their ear and start doing it. And I also don't feel like this is a bad thing. Like, I want to get it straight. I don't feel like it's a bad thing when guys switch companies. Cody going to WWE, and not because it's AEW to WWE, but I think it was a positive for everybody in wrestling. I think Cody had worn his welcome out in AEW.
Yeah.
And I think he was highly welcomed back to WWE. Like Bryan Danielson going from WWE to AEW, I think was an extremely great move for professional wrestling. But I did have a thought while we were watching some USFL this past week. The AEW to me, and once again here, everybody's going to get pissed off. This is my opinion. AEW to me feels like the USFL of football. Because what it feels like to me is it's the undersized, not real spectacular, not a big production. There's quality wrestling. There's a bunch of guys that are really good at what they do, but like it's never gonna gain just world renown. Like it's never gonna be the thing that is mainstream. AEW is always gonna feel like this little niche thing, and that's fine because I almost feel like AEW fans want it that way. AEW fans want it to stay kind of their little secret. And it makes them feel like they're a part of something. If you're an AEW fan, you're just fucking cool, man. You're a cool wrestling fan. Yeah, it is. It's what CM Punk said, right? We're the indie band at the bowling alley. That's great. I want to be the rock star standing on fucking Madison Square Garden stage.
Yeah.
Like, and that's fine. We have a difference in opinions. But I do think that's what AEW feels like to me. Maybe a little higher than USFL. That may be a little low bar, but it definitely, the more and more I watch the two products next to each other, there's a divide. And it's from a production standpoint, it's from a marketing standpoint, it's from the ability to fill out arenas. It all exists. And maybe the wrestling is closer, like wrestling talent is closer to equal, but like in size, it's not closer. In size, the big larger than life characters are in WWE. So like I said, next guy's jumping company. Got me thinking. We haven't seen Cesaro yet.
True.
So that's one that I feel like he's on the blocks. Is it AEW? Is it ROH? Cesaro's not going to not wrestle. He'll show up at some point in time. My question, though, Lauren, was: do you think that Tony Khan sits and like reads the dirt sheets and tries to get a feel for like who's unhappy in WWE, so that he can like plant bugs in like people's ears? Like,
yes, I 100%.
Let's say like with Cesaro, I imagine that when he starts to see a guy who's disgruntled, he's got little birdies that he sends out that go, hey, you'd be much happier in AEW, right? And so these guys, they basically they get out of their contracts, they go over to AEW, they get the big surprise return, and then they're relegated to like nothing. Like half of these guys, where are they?
I don't even know.
I mean, you really think at the end of the day, Adam Cole is just that fucking elated with his position on that roster?
No, because he's just another guy.
I mean, like, how many people are watching Adam Cole? It does feel to me like AEW is just a slightly bigger NXT.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking, I wonder what the pay difference was between NXT and there. If it was significant or not.
AEW guys get paid pretty well. I think Tony Khan has pocketbooks, but it reminds me of the same way, kind of like the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? Because he has so much money, he has no rhyme or reason for what he's paying people. He just writes big checks, right?
Yeah.
And he fucks up the market on like what guys are worth. Oh, I'll just give CM Punk this much money.
Yeah.
Just because he's CM Punk. And then he didn't fucking really do anything with CM Punk. Mustafa Ali felt like somebody that was on the brink of changing companies, but the WWE seemed to kind of roll him back in and go, no, we're going to get you back out there and get you going. He seemed like the perfect fit for AEW. Little guy, flips around a lot, does a lot of cool wrestling shit, but has no real gimmick or no real selling ability, right?
Yeah.
He's not going to get over with the crowd huge. The AEW nerds are going to fucking love him, but that's it. That's what he does. The other person who feels like that to me is Shinsuke Nakamura. When you look at Shinsuke Nakamura, and I like Shinsuke Nakamura a lot, but what is there left for him to do in WWE? When you really look at it, he's not going to win the WWE or the Universal title, especially with them now being unified. He's not even remotely in that picture. Even if he gets a title shot, it's just one of those placeholders for a couple weeks because we got to keep the stories rolling. We saw what he did with the IC title. Hardly ever wrestled, was kind of beat up, banged up. He's older than I thought he was.
Yeah.
And so he seems like the prime next candidate to jump ship. Mm-hmm. Like WWE's got to look at a certain point and go, hey, well, there's just nothing left for him to do. What are we going to do with him? These guys can't just be jobbed out week after week, can they? Can you really just sit and job out Shinsuke Nakamura week after week? I don't think you can. And so I think Shinsuke's probably one of the next to go. He seems like a guy that fits in that whole like forbidden door, and we could put him in some hellacious dream matches, right? CM Punk, Shinsuke Nakamura. Oh God, this is a fucking wrestling nerd's dream. I think like WWE gets what they can out of a guy, and then they're not going to put him in a bunch of these dream matches. That's not what WWE's selling point is. So I feel like he may be the next to go. The other guy I feel like maybe the next to go is Finn Balor. Finn Balor feels like the kind of guy that is Tony Khan's wet dream. That like he sits around and dreams about, right?
All right.
And I have zero idea what these guys' contract status is. So I don't know, like I don't know the reality, but WWE could cut them at any time. But this is just purely going off of like feelings to me. And just like Shinsuke Nakamura, I look at Finn Balor and I go, what is the upside? Mm-hmm. Where do you go? Because he's not young.
No.
So he's not a guy you want to keep in the mid card forever. They're not treating him like a guy who sells tickets. He wasn't even on the WrestleMania card. With like 27 matches, he wasn't on it.
Yeah.
And he, at the time, was the IC title holder. No, the United States title holder.
Yeah.
And just not on the show. I don't know if that says more about the belt or says more about Finn Balor. But basically, right now, they've got him jobbing out to Damian Priest and jobbing out to Theory. So, like, really, how long is Finn Balor going to be happy with that? He seems like a guy who has higher aspirations, especially later in his career, to do bigger things than that. And I ask, why don't we see more of Finn Balor as the Demon?
I don't know. I like the Demon.
Yeah, like, why is that not a thing? Why are we not seeing more of Finn Balor as the Demon in the Demon role? Why isn't he just the Demon all the time?
Is it because it's not PG enough?
I don't think it has anything to do with PG. I think it's one of those things where it's like reserved for special features, but then they never use it at the right time. The Undertaker was the Undertaker all the time.
Yeah. Why
can't like the entrance is more interesting. The makeup is more interesting. The move set and like attitude is more interesting. Why is Finn Balor just not the Demon? Why is that not a thing? Why at every pay-per-view, and this goes back to, I get when people go like, well, WWE is kind of stupid when it comes to these things. You have Bray Wyatt and you don't use Bray Wyatt correctly. And now you have Finn Balor as a Demon and you don't use the Demon correctly. Like it just seems to me, and maybe we're headed there, but does the Demon not seem like the perfect counter to Damian Priest and Edge at this point?
Yeah.
Like it just feels like he should have already transformed into the Demon. So I don't get why we don't get that. The other name I had on this list, and this is kind of a long shot, just like throw it out there. It has some feeling to me. And I know she's not even technically, like she's under WWE contract, but I don't think she's technically like, I'd call her a WWE wrestler, but it's Paige.
Ooh, that would be cool.
And let me explain to you my thinking on Paige, because I think Paige would hold a ton of value in the AEW women's division, even not wrestling. Just managing some of these younger superstars, because the AEW women's roster is young. There's a lot of young girls on that roster, and it feels like Paige could get in there and mentor. And even if she's not taking bumps, I think she's at a point where she could probably get physical. And so I think that she fits that world, that kind of indie, she came from the England wrestling, the little rougher. It just feels like it would make sense having Paige over there as even just a figurehead, kind of like a Sting, right?
Yeah.
You stick her with someone like Chris Statlander or whoever, right? Put her with somebody and she immediately elevates that person. She can talk. She can handle a microphone. She's completely wasted in WWE right now.
I agree.
Like, I don't understand why we don't have Paige doing something, but it does feel like she could elevate the AEW brand. And if WWE is not going to use her, and whether she wrestles ever again or not, Paige needs to be a part of wrestling. She was too integral for too long of a time.
Agreed.
All right, so let's flip the other direction. Let's talk about this from the other direction. There's two names that I think are very strong possibilities to jump over from AEW to the WWE side. And one of them is a little bit of a long shot, and one of them I think is inevitable. And the one that I think is a little bit of a long shot, but I think it's going to happen, and that's Brit Baker. I think at some point in time, Brit Baker is going to have to jump from AEW to WWE, because when you just look around the AEW women's roster, what is there really? Brit Baker is on another level. Like, there's Brit Baker, and then there's the rest of the roster. So there's not a lot to keep putting her to. Like, I get Thunder Rosa's seems like a big deal in AEW, but the fact that they had to come to San Antonio to put the belt on her to get the big pop, like in some other places, people don't really give a shit who Thunder Rosa is. True. Nothing against Thunder Rosa, cool wrestler, but she's not over. Like, so, like when you start playing like big match booking, right, with Brit Baker, there's nobody left on AEW. But then imagine Brit Baker, Sasha Banks. That's a big match. It's a big time match. Oh yeah, that's a match that can main event a pay-per-view and possibly main event a WrestleMania. You've got Britt Baker, Becky Lynch. That's great.
Ooh, that's would be
great. Both of them great mic workers. Bianca Belair and Britt Baker. Here we go again. Another two younger stars.
Bianca versus Britt.
That could be a long-term feud. Charlotte, Alexa Bliss, Bayley. Too many names in the upper echelon of women's wrestling. Like Becky Lynch said it the other day, the AEW women's roster is just different. It's just elevated. It's bigger than the AEW. It's better than the AEW women's roster. And Britt Baker is plug and play in that position. You can slide her in and she's ready to go. She would fit right in with these women. I had a question as I started writing this down and thought about this. Let's pretend for a minute, I know this isn't how wrestling works, but let's pretend for a minute that wrestling was like professional sports in the sense that we could make trades. Okay? Who would you be willing to trade on the WWE roster in order to get Britt Baker from AEW? And when I looked all through, like the only thing that made sense to me was Charlotte. I think I would trade Charlotte Flair for Britt Baker right now.
Okay.
And so this is going to piss off the Charlotte fans. I get it, but you have to look at this objectively. Charlotte comes with a ton of prestige, right? She's won the title 50 million times, is super talented in the ring, lacks a little bit of personality from my point of view, but a lot of people love her. But she's also an older superstar, okay? Mm-hmm. So AEW would get the benefit of a polished, like well-known big name who can main event and draw attractions.
Yeah.
Great. Britt Baker, the marketability on Britt Baker, I think, is limitless. I think eventually she's going to be one of the biggest names in women's wrestling.
I saw she filed for
the DMG trademark. Yeah. Saw that. But also, like, we're going to get to it in a minute. Spoiler here. When I looked at people's ages, I guess I had no idea who was what age in wrestling. And Britt Baker is one of the younger wrestlers. So to see that, I go, well, WWE could get a long-term investment out of that. So you give up Charlotte Flair, big name, big draw, but you're getting in return a young Britt Baker. That's a trade I would make at this point in time. I would trade Charlotte Flair for Britt Baker right now. Like, I would do it, no questions asked.
Trade for the future.
Now, secondly, the second person that I think this one's inevitable, guys. I don't think there's any question this is happening, and I actually have a prediction I'm going to make in a minute, but MJF is going to be in the WWE when his contract expires, unless Tony Khan gives him, and mark my words, the biggest contract in pro wrestling history. It will have to be that big. He will have to be the highest paid wrestler in order not to leave AEW and go to WWE. And even then, that number has to be remarkably higher than what WWE is willing to pay him.
Why?
The potential there is just too high. He is, when you hear him speak, he is wrestling. He is more of a sports entertainer and a wrestler. He's both. He is the epitome of both sides. He's got skills in the ring. He's talented, but he also has that ability to tell a story unlike anybody else. And the problem is, MJF is a WWE kid. He grew up on WWE. He has that kind of taste for WWE. And you can't compare. I'm sorry. You can't compare main eventing AEW All In to going to WrestleMania and wrestling in front of 70 to 100,000 people. It's not the same thing. Like, so money can only get you so far when you're signing a wrestler. MJF is gonna want the WrestleMania moment. And I do feel like that just being like in the top 4 or 5 matches on WrestleMania is a bigger accomplishment than main eventing an All In pay-per-view. Like, they can sell me on like All In is the AEW WrestleMania, but it's not. It's just another real big indie wrestling pay-per-view. It's not, it's nowhere in the echelon of a WrestleMania. And this is going to piss off some AEW fans, but let's be realistic about the AEW World Championship right now. The AEW World Championship is a stepping stone. It is not a mountaintop. It is not a pinnacle of any of it doesn't elevate you in wrestling. You don't become AEW World Champion and all of a sudden you've made it. It's a stepping stone. It's another accomplishment. It's a little better than being Impact World Champion. That's what it is, right? And there's a prime example of this. Look at Hangman Adam Page. He won the AEW World Championship, and it hasn't made him exciting. It hasn't elevated him to another level. The people who liked Hangman, they're all excited, and everybody else is like, how quick can we get this belt off of him? He's boring.
Yeah.
The belt didn't elevate him, and that belt isn't elevating anybody. When you become WWE champion, there's a vibe, you get a little swag off that belt. No matter who you are, if you're Kofi, Sheamus, Roman Reigns, when you become WWE champion, there's a swag that comes with it. And MJF, he's a performer, man. He's not a wrestler. In all terms of the word, he is a sports entertainer. He is what Jericho's making fun of. I dare to say at this moment in time, I truly believe that MJF will be a WWE champion before he ever sees the AEW World Championship. And the cool thing is, like, at his age, he could go to WWE, accomplish some things, and then make a triumphant return back to AEW at some point. He's got that kind of time. But if you look at the AEW World Title, where does MJF really fall in that line? Like, where is he really in that line? You got to think, right? His contract expires January of 2024. This is public knowledge, right? That's 1 year and some change. Okay. So let's assume that Hangman Adam Page is about done with his run. He's going to get like 1 more month out of it. Let's say Punk knocks him off at Double or Nothing, which is the next AEW pay-per-view. Punk's keeping that thing for 6 months at least, because hate him or love him, and I love CM Punk the wrestler, don't love Phil Brooks the person, but CM Punk is going to be a great wrestling champion. That's what he does. He thrives in that position. Heel or face, as champion, he will elevate the brand of AEW. It's a wonder that they've taken this long to put the belt on either him or Bryan Danielson. But let's say they put on Punk next. 6 months. Okay, so that takes us through like November. And you know Tony Khan is watching what WWE is doing. And he sees that WWE is going with these longer title runs with Roman Reigns. So he's going to get that itch to go, I don't want to play hot potato. I don't want to, if I'm the IWC company, I don't want to be the company playing hot potato with the title, because IWC loses their shit every time a belt bounces around a little bit. Like, it's not realistic. Like, like there's not a world UFC where guys get beat 2 pay-per-views after they won the title. That's realistic. Guys can't hold the belt forever. But let's say 6 months for argument's sake, right? Takes us to November. Now, who's next in line after CM Punk? Bryan Danielson. He feels like the proper guy to go after, right? If you're really trying to, like, if you're doing this from a business standpoint, you go CM Punk, then you go CM Punk losing that belt to Bryan Danielson is fucking huge. It's huge. So now you got another 6 months with Bryan Danielson, right?
Yes.
By then, Kenny Omega's back.
Hey.
And you got to start putting Kenny back in that picture, right? Where the fuck is Miro? What happened to Miro? All of a sudden, he's back, and he's going to want to be in that title picture. Moxley's not going to want to just be second fiddle forever. These guys are going to start going, oh, fuck, I can go back to WWE if you've got nothing for me to do. I might as well go back. It's kind of what happened to Cody, I think. It was like, well, there's nothing left for me to do here.
True.
I'm not going to fuck around. Like, because let's be real honest, okay? The TNT title, they can sell it as whatever they want. They can go, these belts are the same thing. TNT, AEW, they're both belts. One's not major, one's not mid-card. Fuck you. That's not how people's minds work. The AEW World Championship, it's the big boy, right? That's where the big guys are. You know who gets the TNT title? Sammy Guevara, okay? Scorpio Sky. Not MJ. You're not giving that belt to Kenny Omega, CM Punk, Chris Jericho, Bryan Danielson. They don't have time for that fucking belt. They want the big boy belt. They want the big shiny belt, right? My best bet for MJF is that maybe they put the TNT belt on him in the next year. And even then, like, that's kind of a fucking disservice to him. He deserves better than that. But the truth is, like, for MJF, how many other shiny toys does Tony Khan find in between now and 2024? Because we were joking around, but let's be real. Like, how many new names does he sign that he goes, what if another guy from WWE becomes available? Like, let's just fucking throw a name. Seth Rollins.
Yeah.
Let's say at some point Seth Rollins gets pissed off and goes, I'm done with WWE. And he goes to AEW. Well, he's in line, right? He jumps the line. So it only takes one or two of those guys before we go, we're out of time. There's no more time to get MJF this belt. There could be a last second panic move, like right before his contract expires, that they try and throw the belt on him. But I truly believe they're not putting the belt on MJF. I don't think they see the benefits in that.
I agree with you.
All right, so having talked all my shit about AEW, let's go through. Let's let Jay remind us what happened this past week in AEW, and we'll be back in about 6 minutes with top.
Wonder what? Step in the ring, if you ready, let's go. Hey, casual wrestling community show. You already know, talking WWE. Keep it rolling and hosted by Notorious Nerdy D. Dope show that you gon' find. Tune in cause it's online. Hit 'em with a figure 4 leg lock, power driver or clothesline. We bringing that heat like for show, but you should already